Welcome back to the show. We're talking about family disputes, and in particular, Family Dispute Resolution Week. And here to tell us about some of the events and, of course, what collaborative things you can do when it comes to family disputes. We're joined by Jim Jeffcott. He's the president of Collaborative Practice Ottawa. Welcome to the show. And Maureen Castella, who has gone through a family dispute herself. I have gone through the same, Maureen, and I certainly know how difficult it can be. Jim, let's first talk about what is Family Dispute Resolution Week exactly?
So Family Dispute Resolution Week is a province-wide event, activity, a whole bunch of things going on. Starting off today with some activities in Toronto. The Attorney General will be speaking. Premier, unfortunately, was called away by some guy, Justin or something like that. So she was unable to attend that. But the AG will be speaking. Today we have some events at City Hall during the week. We have some events at the courthouse. And then on Friday, the marquee event, if you want, is a panel that we're having with a bunch of people who are involved in doing alternative dispute kinds of resolution processes. Okay. And I'll be moderating that debate, that panel, I guess, if you want, and then and then there'll be a little social activity afterwards. So
this week is really about raising awareness for this, for another route. When people think of separation or divorce, they think confrontation. We got to fight this out.
Yeah, lawyer
we got to do all
lawyer.
this thing. Yeah, and so most people don't know that there are alternatives and a more peaceful way to go. Right. How is this different from mediation?
Mediation is a process where there's a single professional, neutral. Okay. And what happens is that the negotiation occurs with those folks. The mediator is a facilitator of the negotiation, if you like. Okay. And then at the end, the agreement is either drafted by that person or not. Maybe they send off terms to lawyers to draft, and then each of the parties has to go and have a lawyer review things. In a collaborative process, the lawyer is with you through the process. They're part of the negotiation. They are not neutral in the sense that each person has their own advocate. Okay. And often there are other professionals involved as well, so financial professionals, family relations professionals. And the advantage there, of course, is that it's a real-time exercise.
Right. I would imagine both parties need to agree to this particular process.
Without question.
Yeah. Right. So if you have one that's a more confrontational party, maybe is this something that you want to avoid, or that's not going to be as productive? Or
interestingly enough, I'm an advocate for using this process where there are high conflict problems, because it actually works better than the court process, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah.
So I actually think, with the support, with the right attitude, and with the right participants, this can be a much better process.
Jim, do you then act as a moderator within this collaborative practice?
So we have several roles as the lawyer. We sometimes are coaches. We are sometimes are negotiating participants. We are sometimes advocates. Okay. So we wear different hats in the process, and it also depends on whether or not we have those other professionals involved. If it's just two lawyers, which is not our preferred method, and two clients, then then I'm doing that moderation depending on whether I'm hosting or not, more than I would be if there was another family relations professional, for example, in the room.
Maureen, sorry, I was going to say, you've gone through this collaborative approach, so maybe describe your experience. How did it go for you?
Well, from my experience, when my marriage dissolved, my husband recommended at the time collaborative process. And to be honest with you, at that point in time, there's a lot of emotions going through, there's a lot of feelings, and there's a lot of words I can use to describe what I felt at the time, and collaboration was not one of them.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
But after 28 years of marriage, when we told our kids, and they were older, they were in their late teens, early 20s, they made it very clear. This goes adversarial, we're out of here.
Okay.
And they expressed what I think a lot of kids feel. But they were old enough they could express it, and they were old enough that they could make good on their threat. So I thought, well, maybe I'll check the collaboration process. And my biggest concern was, once I found out and talked about it, my biggest concern was I wanted to have control.
Right.
I wanted to feel that I was being heard, I was being supported. I didn't know what I was going through, I didn't know what was happening. And the biggest thing is having my lawyer beside me every step of the way, and guiding me and supporting me and letting me know, but ultimately keeping it in a very supportive environment.
Right.
Best thing I ever did.
And unfortunately, separation and divorce is always a costly thing. It's always a cost, to both parties. Financially, emotionally, that's a whole other level. But how does this compare to that? Is it a more cost-effective approach? Is it something?
So it can be a more cost-effective approach.
Yeah.
So the thing about cost, when it comes to family separations or those kinds of processes, it's not the process itself that drives cost. The two things that drive cost in a family dispute are conflict and complication. So to the extent that your situation is not terribly complicated, or to the extent that you can find ways to avoid getting into the conflict, then you're going to keep your costs down. So relatively, I can tell you that my experience is that it tends to cost less than the other processes, but not always.
Right.
But I don't think cost is the only driver here. Right. So
the process.
When I speak to people about process options, cost is one of the considerations. And so is this an appropriate process for you given where we are as far as finances? And absolutely that's a primary consideration. And so I'll talk about that when we discuss which option do we want to go with. The nice thing for me is that I can offer those other process options as well as collaborative, and that's what I do is I say to people, listen, I can do any of these things, just let's talk about what makes sense in your situation. And then, of course, we have to have the other side agree as well. And so that's often a conversation. Often one of the things we talk about in our process is the cost of the process.
Right.
For the week itself and the events that are happening in Ottawa, how can people get involved? Is there a resource they can go
to? So there's a website, fdrweek.ca.
Okay.
That's where they can find out all the information about the province, and there's obviously information about Ottawa as well. And through Collaborative Practice Ottawa, which is the website for our group. So that, of course, talks about the process, broadly speaking, but focuses on collaborative, of course. We do some discussion about alternatives, as far as comparing, but that focuses on collaborative practice.
Excellent. Jim, thanks so much for joining
us.
Thanks for
Maureen.
Thanks for sharing your story as well. We really appreciate it. As promised, we're going to have a fabulous band on the show, Harriet Band, Alex and Cynthia.